They spent $500,000 on a wedding, but refused to pay for my chemotherapy. Now they beg for my help. Hi, I'm Maria, and I'm 60 years old. I never thought I'd be sharing my life online like this. But sometimes you just need your story to be heard, especially when it includes betrayal, heartbreak, and an ending even I couldn't have predicted. You see, I was once the family rock, the caregiver, the peacemaker, the one who remembered birthdays and made everyone's favorite pie. But when I got sick, the very people I had supported my entire life turned their backs on me until they needed something. This is my story. Have you ever been abandoned by the people you thought would be there when it mattered most? Share some of your experience in the comments. Before we begin, I would be glad to know that my story gets to people in different parts of the world. So please let me know where you're watching from. I still remember the weight of the envelope in my hands, thick and creamy, sealed with a gold wax stamp. It was an invitation to my niece Claire's wedding to her fiancé, Dylan. The card inside shimmered with embossed lettering, announcing a weekend-long celebration at a sprawling vineyard estate. I ran my fingers over the words, feeling a mix of pride and curiosity. Claire, the little girl I'd once taught to braid daffodils into crowns, was getting married. And not just any wedding, this was a $500,000 affair. I called Claire the next day, my voice bright despite the early hour. Sweetheart, this invitation, it's beautiful. Are you sure you want me there? I mean, it sounds so grand. Her laugh came through the phone, warm and insistent. Aunt Maria? You're like a second mum to me. You have to be there. It wouldn't be the same without you. Promise me you'll come. I smiled, clutching the phone a little tighter. Of course I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur. I spent hours hunting for the perfect dress, something elegant, but not too flashy, settling on a deep emerald gown that made me feel like I could hold my own among the glitz. I even splurged on a new pair of shoes, though my budget groaned in protest. Claire and Dylan had always been ambitious, but this wedding sounded like something out of a fairy tale. I couldn't wait to see it. When the day arrived, I drove 3 hours to the vineyard, my old sedan rattling over the gravel roads. The estate was breathtaking, acres of rolling vines under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. White-gloved staff ushered me through gates adorned with fresh roses, and I caught my breath at the sight of the main venue. A grand pavilion draped in silk, with chandeliers glittering even in daylight. I was stunned. I'd heard whispers about the cost, $500,000, maybe more. Custom ice sculptures shaped like swans melted slowly in the sun. A string quartet played Vivaldi, while a celebrity singer, some pop star I vaguely recognized from TV, crooned for the cocktail hour. There was even a fireworks display choreographed to music. I shook my head, chuckling to myself. Claire and Dylan had outdone themselves. At the reception, I found Claire in her gown, a vision of lace and diamonds, her face glowing as she hugged me tightly. Aunt Maria, you made it. You look amazing. I hugged her back, careful not to smudge her makeup. You're the star here, sweetheart. This is incredible. I'm so proud of you. Dylan joined us, his tuxedo pristine, his smile wide. Maria, thanks for coming. It means a lot to Claire, to both of us. We chatted for a while, reminiscing about family barbecues and Claire's childhood antics. I felt a warmth in my chest, like I was part of something bigger, something lasting. The night spun on, speeches, toasts, a cake that looked like it belonged in a museum. I danced a little, laughed a lot, and went to bed that night thinking life couldn't get much better. What's the most expensive or over-the-top wedding you've ever attended? Was it worth it? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you're hooked already. 2 months later, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, warm for early fall. I was in my garden, tugging at some stubborn weeds, when the world tilted. My vision blurred and my knees buckled. I hit the ground hard, dirt smearing my cheek. When I came to, my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, was hovering over me, her face pale. "Maria, oh my God, are you okay? I'm calling an ambulance." I tried to wave her off, embarrassed. "I'm fine, just got dizzy. Too much sun, probably." But she wouldn't hear it. The paramedics arrived, and soon I was in the ER, staring at a ceiling tiled with fluorescent lights. Hours later, a doctor with kind eyes but a grim expression sat across from me. "Maria, we've run some tests. It's lymphoma, stage 2, treatable, but we'll need to start chemotherapy soon." The word hit like a punch. Cancer. I nodded, my throat tight, as he explained treatment plans, costs, and survival rates. I barely heard him. All I could think was, I'm not ready to go. I spent the next few days in a fog, researching treatments and costs. My savings were modest, enough for rent and groceries, not for medical bills that could climb into the tens of thousands. I hated asking for help. I'd always been the one to give, not take. But I thought of Claire and Dylan, their wedding, their promises. They'd called me family. Surely they'd want to help. I called Claire first, my hands shaking as I dialed. She picked up on the third ring, her voice bubbly. "Aunt Maria, how are you?" I took a deep breath. "Claire, I've got some news. I've been diagnosed with lymphoma. It's treatable, but the chemo, it's expensive. I hate asking, but I thought maybe you and Dylan could help, even a little." There was a long pause, the kind that makes your stomach twist. When she spoke, her tone was different, clipped. "Oh, Maria, that's awful. I'm so sorry, but we're still paying off the wedding. It was a lot, you know. I'm sure you're strong. You'll figure something out." I blinked, stunned. "Claire, I don't know if I can. The costs are... Look, I've got to run. We're meeting with a planner for our honeymoon. I'll call you soon, okay? Stay strong." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my chest hollow. I tried Dylan next, hoping he'd be different. His voicemail picked up, and I left a message, my voice cracking. "Dylan, it's Maria. I'm sick. Lymphoma. I could really use your help. Please call me back." He didn't. Days turned into weeks. I called again, sent texts, even wrote a letter, pouring out my heart. Silence. My family, the ones I'd cheered for, cooked for, loved, had vanished when I needed them most. I started chemo alone, the bills piling up like a cruel joke. Each session left me weaker, my hair thinning, my hope fading. I'd lie awake at night, replaying Claire's words. "You'll figure something out." As if I hadn't spent my life figuring things out for everyone else. But then, something shifted. 6 months after my diagnosis, my phone rang. Claire's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was frantic, nothing like the cool dismissal from before. "Aunt Maria, please, you have to help us. Dylan's in trouble. We're desperate." I gripped the phone, my heart pounding. After everything, they were begging me for help. Part of me wanted to hang up, to let them drown in their own mess. But another part, the part that still remembered Claire as a little girl, clutching my hand, couldn't let go. What had happened to Dylan? Why were they suddenly so desperate? And after all they'd done, or hadn't done, would I even help them? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over. I gripped the phone, Claire's frantic voice echoing in my ears. "Aunt Maria, please, you have to help us. Dylan's in trouble. We're desperate." My heart thudded, torn between the sting of their betrayal and the faint pull of loyalty to the family I'd always loved. I wanted to scream, to ask why they thought I owed them anything after they'd left me to face cancer alone. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Claire, I need to think. I'll call you back." I hung up, my hands trembling, unsure if I'd ever return that call. Days passed, and I wrestled with the decision. Memories of Claire as a child, her tiny hand in mine, her laughter as we baked cookies, clashed with the cold reality of her dismissal months ago. "You'll figure something out." Those words still burned. I stared at the stack of medical bills on my kitchen table, each one a reminder of the sacrifices I'd made to keep fighting. My savings were gone, my strength was fading, and the family I'd poured my life into had vanished when I needed them most. Claire didn't call again. Neither did Dylan. The silence was deafening, a confirmation of what I'd begun to fear. I was only valuable to them when I could give. I lay awake at night, the chemo leaving me nauseous and weak, wondering what kind of trouble Dylan was in. Part of me wanted to know, to understand why they'd come crawling back. But another part, the part that was tired, so tired, wanted to let them face the consequences of their choices. Weeks turned into months, and the world kept turning without their voices. No texts, no apologies, no offers to help with the mounting costs of my treatment. I sold my car to cover a few more chemo sessions. The old sedan that had carried me to Claire's wedding now gone, just like my trust in her. I moved into a smaller apartment, a cramped one-bedroom with thin walls and a leaky faucet, because it was all I could afford. The vibrant garden I'd once tended was a distant memory, replaced by a single potted plant on a windowsill, its leaves drooping despite my care. My friend Evelyn became my lifeline. She'd show up with homemade soup or drive me to appointments when I was too weak to take the bus. One afternoon, as we sat in my tiny living room, she set down her mug and fixed me with a look that was equal parts love and frustration. "Maria, you've spent your whole life taking care of others. You raised Claire like she was your own. And where are they now? It's time someone took care of you." I sighed, picking at a thread on my sweater. "I keep thinking they'll call, you know, that they'll realize what they've done. But nothing." Evelyn leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "They made their choice. You don't owe them anything, not after they let you go through this alone." Her words hit hard, stirring the loneliness that had settled in my bones. I'd always been the one to mend family rifts, to host dinners, to remember the little things that kept us connected. Now, I was a ghost in their lives, invisible until they needed something. The weight of that truth pressed down, heavier than the cancer itself. I stared out the window, watching rain streak the glass. What had happened to Dylan? Why had Claire sounded so desperate? And why, after all this time, did I still feel a flicker of hope that they'd come back, not for favors, but for me? I didn't have answers, but the silence was teaching me something. Maybe the family I'd fought for wasn't the one I deserved. The rain kept falling, a steady drum against my window, mirroring the ache in my chest. Evelyn's words lingered, they made their choice. But the silence from Claire and Dylan gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the memory of Claire's desperate voice, begging for help after months of nothing. What kind of trouble was Dylan in? And why did I still care? I was weaker now, the chemo carving hollows under my eyes. But curiosity, or maybe stubbornness, pushed me forward. I needed answers, even if they hurt. Evelyn tried to talk me out of digging deeper. "Maria, let them go," she said one evening, her voice sharp over the phone. "You're fighting for your life. They don't deserve your energy." But I couldn't let it rest. Not yet. I started making calls, reaching out to old friends, anyone who might know something about Claire and Dylan's world. That's when I remembered Teresa, a friend from years back who worked in the event industry. She'd planned weddings for the wealthy, and I had a hunch she might know something about that extravagant vineyard affair. I drove to Teresa's office on a grey morning, my borrowed coat damp from the drizzle. Her office was a cozy chaos of fabric swatches and mood boards, and she greeted me with a hug that felt like home. "Maria, you've been through it," she said, her eyes scanning my frail frame. "How are you holding up?" "Barely," I admitted, sinking into a chair. "Teresa, I need to ask you something. About Claire and Dylan's wedding. It was huge, $500,000. They told me they were in debt from it, but I'm starting to wonder." Teresa's brow furrowed, and she leaned back, tapping a pen against her desk. "That wedding was the talk of the industry. I wasn't on the planning team, but I know the vendors. Let me make a few calls." She picked up her phone, and within minutes, she was nodding, scribbling notes. When she hung up, her expression was grim. "Maria, there's no way they're in debt," she said, her voice low. "Dylan's family money covered that wedding. Old money, from his grandfather's real estate empire. The vineyard, the ice sculptures, that pop star, paid in full, up front. They've got trust funds, investments, the works. If they told you they couldn't help, it wasn't about money." The room spun. I gripped the armrest, my breath shallow. "You're saying they had the money? To help me with chemo? To do something?" Teresa nodded, her eyes soft with pity. "More than enough. I'm so sorry, Maria." I stared at the floor, the truth slicing through me. Claire's cold words, "We're still paying off the wedding," weren't a plea of hardship. They were a lie. They hadn't helped me, not because they couldn't, but because I wasn't worth it to them. All those years I'd been their rock, their second mom, their pie-making, birthday remembering aunt. And when I needed them, they'd chosen indifference. I drove home in a daze, Teresa's words replaying. I thought of the nights I'd lain awake, praying for a call, a gesture, anything to show they cared. Instead, they'd built a wall of lies, hiding behind a debt that didn't exist. My anger grew, sharp and unfamiliar, but so did my resolve. If they didn't care enough to help me, why was I still holding space for them? Claire's frantic call echoed again. Dylan's in trouble. Part of me wanted to confront them, to demand why they'd lied. But another part wondered, what if their desperation was real? What if I could use it to finally get the truth? I wasn't sure what I'd do next, but one thing was clear. I wasn't the same Maria who'd begged for their help. Not anymore. The truth about Dylan's wealth burned in me like a slow fire. I'd driven home from Teresa's office. Her words, they had more than enough, looping in my mind. Claire and Dylan hadn't just turned their backs on me. They'd lied to my face, hiding behind a fake debt while I sold my car and moved into a crumbling apartment to pay for chemo. I was furious, but more than that, I was done. Done waiting for apologies that would never come. Done believing they'd ever see me as more than a convenience. Yet Claire's desperate call, "Dylan's in trouble," still tugged at me. I hated that it did. I didn't call her back. Instead, I focused on surviving. The loneliness of those silent months had hardened me, but it also showed me who my real family was. Evelyn kept showing up, bringing groceries or just sitting with me through the worst chemo days. My neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, organized a small fundraiser at the community center, and strangers, people I'd never met, chipped in to help cover my treatment. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, humbled by their kindness. It wasn't enough to erase the sting of Claire's betrayal, but it kept me going. One night, as I watered my drooping potted plant, I caught my reflection in the window. Thinner, greyer, but alive. I'd made it through another round of chemo, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. I wasn't out of the woods, but I was still here. That's when I decided I wouldn't chase Claire or Dylan. If they wanted me, they'd have to come to me. And if they did, I'd be ready. Not as the aunt who fixed everything, but as someone who knew her worth. A year passed, and I settled into a fragile new normal. The grant from a local cancer charity covered my final treatments, and the fundraiser money let me move back to a slightly better apartment, one with a tiny balcony where I could grow herbs again. I was weaker than I used to be, but I felt stronger in a different way, like I'd reclaimed pieces of myself I'd given away for too long. Claire and Dylan stayed silent, their absence a wound that scabbed over but never quite healed. I stopped expecting their calls, stopped hoping for reconciliation. Life, I thought, was teaching me to let go. Then, one stormy night, a knock rattled my door. I froze, the sound sharp against the howl of the wind. It was late, nearly midnight, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole, my heart lurching. Claire stood there, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her face. She looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes wide with something like fear. I opened the door, the cold air rushing in. "Claire, what are you doing here?" She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, dripping water onto my rug. "Maria, I didn't know where else to go. Dylan's been arrested. We need your help, please." I stared at her, the words sinking in. Arrested? My mind raced, pulling up a frantic call from a year ago, the one I'd ignored. I crossed my arms, keeping my voice steady. "You show up after a year of silence, and now you need my help. Claire, you lied to me. You and Dylan had the money to help with my treatment, and you did nothing." Her face crumpled, but she didn't deny it. I know we messed up. I'm so sorry, Maria. I was caught up in the wedding, in Dylan's world. I didn't think. You didn't think." I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. "I was fighting for my life, Claire. I sold my car. I moved to a place with mold on the walls, and you couldn't even call." She flinched, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "I'm ashamed, okay? I should have done more. But Dylan, he's in serious trouble. They're saying fraud, maybe prison. We're losing everything. I didn't know who else to turn to." I studied her, the girl I'd once braided flowers for. Now a stranger begging at my door. Fraud? Prison? The pieces didn't add up, and I felt that old pull, curiosity, maybe even pity, battling the anger I'd nursed for so long. "Why me?" I asked, my voice low. "After everything, why do you think I'd help you now?" Claire's eyes met mine, desperate and raw. "Because you're the only one who ever cared enough to fix things, even when we didn't deserve it." Her words hit like a punch, stirring memories of the family I'd fought to hold together. But I wasn't that Maria anymore. I'd survived too much to fall back into old patterns. Still, the word fraud echoed, raising questions I couldn't ignore. What had Dylan done? Was Claire telling the truth, or was this another lie to pull me back in? I didn't know, but standing there with the storm raging outside, I felt the weight of a choice. I could slam the door and walk away, or I could listen, just long enough to understand what they dragged me into. "Sit down," I said finally, pointing to the couch. "Start talking, and don't leave anything out." Claire nodded, her shoulders slumping as she sank onto the cushion. I closed the door, the click loud in the quiet room. Whatever came next, I wasn't sure I was ready, but I was done being the one left in the dark. What would you do if someone who abandoned you came begging for your help? Would you turn them away or hear them out? Share your thoughts." Claire sat on my couch, her hands twisting in her lap, the storm outside rattling the windows. Her plea hung in the air. "Dylan's been arrested. We need your help." I stood across from her, arms crossed, the weight of her words and a year of silence pressing against my chest. She looked broken, her eyes red from crying, but I couldn't let myself soften. Not yet. I'd survived cancer, betrayal, and their lies about the wedding debt. Whatever trouble Dylan was in, I needed the truth before I decided anything. "Fraud," I said, my voice steady despite the churn in my stomach. "What did he do, Claire? And don't give me half answers. If you want my help, I need to know everything." She swallowed hard, glancing at the floor. "It's bad, Maria. Really bad. I don't even know where to start." "Start at the beginning," I said, sitting in the armchair across from her. "And don't leave anything out." Claire took a shaky breath, and I braced myself, unsure if I was ready for whatever came next. She started talking, her voice low and halting. "Dylan's been arrested for fraud. They're saying he took money that wasn't his. From a company. It's complicated, and I didn't know how deep it went until now. I swear, Maria, I didn't know it would come to this." I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. "What company? What money? Claire, you're not making sense." She bit her lip, tears welling up again. "It's not just fraud. They're investigating him for embezzlement from one of Dad's companies. Dylan was managing part of it, and we used some of that money for the wedding. To make it bigger, better. We thought we could cover it up, move funds around, but it's all crashing down now." I froze, her words hitting like a slap. "You stole from your father's company? For the wedding?" My voice rose, disbelief sharpening every syllable. "That $500,000 circus with the ice swans and the pop star, that was stolen money?" Claire flinched, her hands covering her face. "Not all of it. Dylan's family money paid for most of it, but we needed more to make it perfect. Dad's company had so much, and Dylan said it wouldn't be missed. He said he'd fix it later, but then the auditors came, and now they've traced it back to him. He could go to prison, Maria. We could lose everything." I stood, pacing the small room, my mind reeling. The wedding I'd danced at, the one I'd worn my emerald dress for, wasn't just extravagant. It was a crime scene. And they'd let me beg for help, let me sell my car and move to a moldy apartment, while they funneled stolen money into chandeliers and fireworks. My chest tightened, anger and hurt colliding. "You knew," I said, turning to her. "You knew where the money came from, and you still told me you were in debt. You lied to my face while I was fighting cancer." "I didn't know how to tell you," Claire sobbed, her voice breaking. "I was scared. Dylan said it was under control, that we'd pay it back. I didn't think it would hurt anyone. I didn't think it would hurt you." "Didn't think?" I snapped, my voice trembling. "Claire, I was family to you. I raised you when your mum was too busy. I cheered at your graduations. I loved you like my own. And you couldn't even help me pay for chemo because you were too busy covering up a crime." She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry, Maria. I know we failed you. I know I don't deserve your help. But Dylan, he's facing years in prison. They're building a case and we're out of options." I stopped pacing, my heart pounding. "What do you want from me, Claire? Why are you here?" She hesitated, then met my eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "If you testify as a character witness, it could help. The lawyers say a strong testimony from someone like you, someone respected, someone who's known us forever, could sway the judge. Please, Maria." I know we don't deserve it, but I'm begging you." I stared at her, stunned. "Testify? For Dylan, who'd embezzled money while I scraped by? For Claire, who'd lied to me and left me to face cancer alone?" The audacity of it burned, but so did the weight of her desperation. I thought of the little girl who'd clung to me, the family I'd fought for, and the woman I'd become, one who'd survived too much to be anyone's doormat. "Claire," I said, my voice low, "you're asking me to stand up in court and vouch for a man who stole, who lied, who didn't care if I lived or died. And you think I'd do that because... what? Because I'm family? I know it's a lot," she said quickly, "but you're the only one who can make a difference. You've always been the one who fixes things. Please, Maria, I'll do anything to make it right." I shook my head, exhaustion settling over me. The storm outside roared, but inside a different storm was brewing, one of choices and consequences. Could I testify for them, knowing what they'd done? Or should I walk away, letting them face the mess they'd made? And what about the truth? Did I owe it to myself to expose their lies? Or was there still a chance for redemption? I didn't have answers, not yet. But as Claire sat there, waiting for my response, I knew one thing. Whatever I chose, it would be for me, not them. Claire's plea hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking. Testify as a character witness. For Dylan, who'd embezzled money from her father's company to fund their lavish wedding. For Claire, who'd lied about their debt while I begged for help with my chemo. I stood in my small living room, the storm outside mirroring the chaos within me. Her tear-streaked face begged for mercy, but my heart was a battleground, anger, hurt, and the faint echo of love for the girl I'd raised warring inside. I wanted to scream, to slam the door on her and the family that had abandoned me, but I didn't. Not yet. "I need time, Claire," I said, my voice cold. "You can't just show up after a year and expect me to jump. Go home, I'll call you when I'm ready." She nodded, her shoulders slumping, and left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. I sank into the armchair, my hands trembling. Embezzlement, prison. The truth about their wedding was a knife, twisting deeper with every revelation. I'd survived cancer, barely, thanks to strangers and a grant, while Claire and Dylan had funneled stolen money into ice sculptures and fireworks. And now they wanted me to save them? The audacity burned, but so did the questions. Could I turn my back completely? Or was there still a piece of me that wanted to fix this, despite everything? I spent the next few days in a fog, replaying Claire's confession. Evelyn, my rock through it all, was blunt when I told her. "Maria, they don't deserve you. Let them drown in their mess." But it wasn't that simple. Family, even a broken one, had roots that tangled deep. I wasn't sure what I'd do, but I knew I couldn't decide alone. Not when the whole family was involved in this mess, whether they admitted it or not. A week later, an email from my cousin Linda landed in my inbox. "Family dinner. Urgent. We need to talk about Claire and Dylan." My stomach twisted. I hadn't seen most of them since the wedding, and even then, they'd been too caught up in the glitz to notice me fading into the background. I almost deleted the email, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was defiance. If they wanted to talk, I'd show up, not as the peacemaker they expected, but as the woman who'd survived their neglect. The dinner was at Linda's house, a sprawling suburban home with a dining room that could seat 20. I arrived late, my emerald dress swapped for a simple sweater and jeans, my hair still thin from chemo, but pulled back defiantly. The room buzzed with tension as I walked in. Linda at the head of the table. Her husband, Greg, beside her. Claire and her parents. My brother Tom and his wife. and a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. Dylan was absent, likely in custody or hiding from the shame. Claire's eyes flicked to me, red-rimmed and pleading, but I looked away, taking a seat at the far end. Linda cleared her throat, her voice tight. "Maria, thank you for coming. We're here because our family's in crisis. Dylan's been arrested, and Claire's told us you know the details. We need to come together, like we always have." I raised an eyebrow, my fingers tightening around my water glass. "Come together? That's rich, Linda. Where was this family when I was diagnosed with lymphoma?" The room went still. Tom shifted uncomfortably, his wife staring at her plate. Linda's smile faltered, but she pressed on. "Maria, we all feel terrible about that. We were caught up, but this is different. Dylan's facing prison. We need you." "Need me?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but sharp. "You needed me when I was planning your kids' birthdays, Linda. When I was helping Tom with his mortgage payments. When I was practically raising Claire because her parents were too busy. But when I was sitting in a chemo chair, alone, where were you?" Claire's mother, Susan, spoke up, her voice trembling. "Maria, we didn't know how bad it was. You always seemed so strong." "Strong?" I laughed, the sound bitter. "I sold my car, Susan. I moved into a dump with mold on the walls because I couldn't afford rent and treatment. I begged Claire and Dylan for help, and they lied to me, said they were in debt from the wedding, but you know what? There was no debt. They had money, stolen money, and they still did nothing." Gasps rippled around the table. Tom's face paled. "Stolen? What are you talking about?" I looked at Claire, who was staring at her hands silent. "Tell them," I said. "Tell them what you told me. About the embezzlement. About how you and Dylan took money from Dad's company for your wedding." Claire's voice was barely audible. "It's true. We used company funds. Dylan said it wouldn't be noticed, but the auditors found out. He's been charged with embezzlement." The room erupted. Linda's husband slammed his fist on the table. "You stole from the family business. Do you know what this could do to us?" Susan buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Tom swore under his breath, his eyes darting between Claire and me. Linda stood, her face red. "This is why we need you, Maria. You're the matriarch of this family. You're supposed to keep us together, no matter what. If you testify for Dylan, like Claire asked, it could save him. It could save us." I stood too, my chair scraping the floor. "Matriarch? Where was this family when I was fighting for my life? You didn't call, didn't visit, didn't even send a card. You left me to strangers and charity grants. And now you want me to stand up in court and vouch for a thief because it's convenient for you?" Greg, Linda's husband, pointed a finger at me. "You're being selfish, Maria. This isn't just about you. The family's reputation is at stake. If Dylan goes down, the business could collapse. Think about what that means for all of us." "Selfish?" I stepped closer, my voice rising. "I gave everything to this family. I was there for every crisis, every celebration. And when I needed you, you were too busy toasting at a wedding built on lies. Don't you dare call me selfish." Susan reached for my hand, her eyes pleading. "Maria, please. We know we failed you, but Claire's our daughter, Dylan's her husband. If there's a chance to help them, isn't it worth it?" I pulled my hand away, my chest heaving. "Worth it? You don't get to guilt me into this. I don't owe you anything. Not after you let me face cancer alone." The room fell silent again, the weight of my words sinking in. Claire's sobs were the only sound, soft and broken. I looked around, at the faces I'd once loved. now strangers united by their own desperation. Part of me wanted to walk out, to let them unravel without me. But another part, the part that still remembered the family we used to be, hesitated. Testifying could help Dylan, maybe even Claire. But it would mean swallowing my pain, standing up for people who'd abandoned me. And what if the truth came out in court? What if I was dragged into their mess? I sat back down, my voice low. I'll think about it, but not because you're family, because I need to decide what's right for me. Linda nodded, her expression a mix of relief and unease. That's all we ask, Maria. Just think about it. I didn't respond. The dinner dragged on, but I barely heard the chatter. My mind was elsewhere, wrestling with the choice ahead. Could I testify and risk my own peace? Or should I walk away, letting their world collapse? And what did it mean to be the matriarch of a family that had forgotten me? I didn't know, but as I left Linda's house, the night air cold against my skin, I felt the weight of a decision that would change everything. I drove away from Linda's house, the family's voices echoing in my head. You're the matriarch, Maria. You're supposed to keep us together. The guilt they'd tried to heap on me clung like damp air, but my own words burned brighter. Where was this family when I was sitting in a chemo chair alone? The dinner had been a battlefield, each face around the table a reminder of the betrayal I'd endured. Claire's confession about the embezzlement, the stolen money that funded their wedding, and their plea for me to testify as a character witness for Dylan had left me raw. I gripped the steering wheel, the dark road ahead blurring as I wrestled with what came next. Back home, I sat in my small apartment, the silence heavy. My potted herbs on the balcony swayed in the night breeze, survivors like me. I'd made it through cancer, thanks to strangers, a grant, and Evelyn's unwavering support. Not the family who now begged for my help. The weight of their expectations pressed down, stirring memories of who I used to be. The aunt who fixed everything, the one who never said no. But I wasn't her anymore. I'd fought too hard, lost too much, to slip back into that role. I pulled out a photo from a drawer, one from years ago, Claire as a teenager, grinning beside me at a family barbecue, her hair braided with daisies I'd tucked in. My heart ached for that girl, but the woman who'd shown up at my door begging for Dylan's salvation was a stranger. Could I testify for them, knowing they'd lied about their wealth, left me to scrape by while they hid their crimes? Or should I walk away, letting their world crumble? The choice felt like a stone in my chest, heavy and immovable. The next morning, I called Evelyn. She answered on the first ring, her voice warm but edged with concern. Maria, you okay? You sound heavy. I sighed, staring at the photo still on my table. I went to a family dinner last night. They want me to testify for Dylan as a character witness. They called me the matriarch, said I'm supposed to hold us together. But Evelyn, they weren't there when I needed them. Not one of them. She was quiet for a moment, then her voice came firm and clear. Maria, forgiveness is noble, but don't set yourself on fire to keep them warm. They abandoned you when you were fighting for your life. You don't owe them a thing. Her words hit like a lifeline, grounding me. I know, I said softly, but part of me still feels responsible. Like if I don't help, I'm letting go of who I am. You're not letting go of you, Evelyn said. You're letting go of their version of you, the one they used up and tossed aside. You're stronger now, Mariah. You decide what you're worth. I hung up, her warning echoing. Don't set yourself on fire. I spent the day walking through my neighborhood, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot, my mind turning over every angle. Testifying could help Dylan, maybe keep Claire from losing everything. but it would mean standing in a courtroom, vouching for a man who'd embezzled money while I sold my car to pay for chemo. It would mean facing the family who'd guilted me, who'd called me selfish for daring to prioritize myself. And what if the truth came out? What if my testimony dragged me into their legal mess? By evening, I sat on my balcony, a mug of tea cooling in my hands. I thought of the chemo chair, the cold plastic against my skin, the nausea that came in waves. I'd sat there alone, no family by my side, while strangers at a fundraiser gave what they could. That memory hardened my resolve. I wasn't the matriarch they wanted, a doormat to fix their mistakes. I was Maria, a survivor, and my life was mine to protect. But the decision wasn't just about saying no. It was about what I stood for. If I walked away, I'd be free, but I'd carry the what-ifs. What if Claire was truly sorry? What if Dylan's punishment destroyed the family for good? If I testified, I risked my peace, my health, maybe even my reputation if the embezzlement case unraveled further. I needed more than anger to decide. I needed clarity. I called Teresa, my friend from the event industry, who'd first uncovered Dylan's lie about the wedding debt. She met me for coffee the next day, her face softening when she saw me. "You look better than last time," she said, sliding into the booth. "But I can tell something's eating you." I told her everything. Claire's midnight visit, the embezzlement, the family dinner, the plea to testify. She listened, her eyes narrowing as I described Linda's guilt trip. When I finished, she leaned back, sipping her coffee. "Maria, they're playing you. They know you're the only one with enough heart to bail them out. But you've got to ask, what's this costing you?" "I don't know," I admitted. I keep thinking about Claire as a kid, how she trusted me. But then I think about the lies, the silence. I don't know if I can trust them again. "You don't have to," Teresa said. "Trust yourself. You've been through hell and come out stronger. Whatever you choose, make sure it's for you, not them." Her words stayed with me as I drove home. I spent the next few days journaling, something I hadn't done since my diagnosis. I wrote about the wedding, the betrayal, the chemo, the fundraiser. I wrote about the family I'd loved and the family they'd become. Slowly, the fog began to lift. I wasn't deciding between helping them or abandoning them. I was deciding who I wanted to be. A woman who carried her pain like armor, or one who let it go without losing herself. A week later, I sat down with a notepad and made a list. Reasons to testify. Claire's desperation, the faint chance of rebuilding something with her, the hope of softening Dylan's sentence. Reasons not to. Their lies, their abandonment, the risk to my health and peace. The second list was longer, heavier. I thought of Evelyn's warning, of the strangers who'd helped me when my family didn't. I thought of the woman I'd seen in the mirror after chemo, frail but fierce, a survivor who'd earned her say. I called Claire that night. She answered on the second ring, her voice trembling. "Maria, have you decided?" I took a deep breath, my heart steady. "I have. I'm not testifying, Claire. I can't stand up in court and vouch for Dylan, not after what you both did. You lied to me, left me to fight cancer alone, and now you're asking me to fix your mess. I'm done being that person." Her voice cracked. "Maria, please. I know we hurt you, but we're family. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It used to," I said. "But family doesn't abandon you when you're dying. Family doesn't lie about stolen money while you lose everything. I've given you all I had, and I got nothing back. I'm choosing me now." She sobbed, but I didn't waver. "I'm sorry you're in this, Claire. I hope you find a way through, but it's not my fight." I hung up, the silence that followed both heavy and freeing. I'd expected to feel guilt, but instead I felt light, like I'd set down a burden I'd carried too long. Evelyn was right. I didn't have to set myself on fire for them. I'd survived too much to burn out now. The next day, I planted a new herb on my balcony. Basil, vibrant and green. It was small, but it was mine, a promise to keep growing. Claire and Dylan's fate was out of my hands, but mine wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt like I was writing my own story, not theirs. What came next? Whether they faced prison, redemption, or ruin, I didn't know. But I knew I'd face it standing tall, no longer the matriarch, but Maria, whole and enough. The basil plant on my balcony caught the morning light, its leaves a quiet victory. Hanging up on Claire, refusing to testify, had felt like cutting a cord. Painful, but liberating. I'd chosen myself, a decision that left me lighter than I'd been in years. Evelyn's words, "Don't set yourself on fire to keep them warm," had anchored me. And for the first time, I saw a future where I wasn't defined by my family's demands. I'd survived cancer, their betrayal, and their guilt trips. I was done being their matriarch, their fixer. But life, I'd learned, had a way of throwing curves just when you thought you'd found solid ground. A few days after my call with Claire, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "Please, Maria, can we talk? I'm begging." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete button. I'd said my piece, drawn my line. But something in her words, raw, desperate, stirred the part of me that still remembered her as the girl with daisies in her hair. Not enough to sway me, but enough to make me curious. What could she possibly say now? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I called Evelyn, needing her clarity. "She's texting again," I said, pacing my small apartment. "Wants to talk." I told her I'm done, but I don't know. Should I hear her out? Evelyn's sigh crackled through the phone. "Maria, you've got a bigger heart than most, but don't let it pull you back into their mess. If you talk to her, set boundaries. Hard ones. You're not their savior." "I know," I said, glancing at the basil plant. "But maybe there's a way to close this without burning every bridge. I just don't know what it looks like yet." That night, I texted Claire back. "One meeting. My terms. Tomorrow, noon, at the coffee shop on Maple." She agreed instantly, and I went to bed wondering if I was opening a door I'd regret. The next day, I arrived early, claiming a corner booth. Claire walked in, pale and jittery, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. She slid into the seat across from me, her hands clasped tightly. "Maria, thank you for meeting me. I know I don't deserve it." "You don't," I said, my voice calm but firm. "So why am I here, Claire? I told you I'm not testifying. What's changed?" She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dylan's case is falling apart. The lawyers say a character witness could make or break it. Without you, he's looking at years in prison. I know we hurt you, Maria. I know we failed you. But I'm begging, please, reconsider." I leaned back, studying her. The desperation was real, but so was my resolve. "Claire, you lied to me about the wedding debt. You stole from your father's company. You left me to fight cancer alone. Why should I put myself on the line for you now?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I have no excuses. I was selfish, caught up in Dylan's world. I thought we could fix it, but we made it worse. I'm so sorry, Mariah. If I could go back, I'd do everything differently." "Sorry doesn't erase what you did," I said. "I sold my car, moved to a moldy apartment, and relied on strangers to survive. You had the money, stolen or not, and you did nothing. Now you want me to save Dylan? Give me one reason I should." Claire's hands trembled as she reached into her bag, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "I know it's not enough, but I want to make it right. This is a start." She slid the paper across the table. I unfolded it. A pledge to donate $10,000 to the hospital that had treated my lymphoma. My breath caught. "What is this?" "It's for the hospital," Claire said. "The one that saved you. If you testify, we'll donate it. And more, if we can. I know it doesn't fix the past, but it's something. Please, Maria." I stared at the pledge, my mind racing. The hospital had been my lifeline, its staff and programs funded by donations like this. It wasn't just about me, it was about others like me, fighting battles they couldn't afford. But testifying meant stepping into Dylan's mess, risking my peace, maybe even my reputation. I looked at Claire, her face a mix of hope and fear, and felt the weight of a new choice. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But if I do this, it's not for you. It's for the hospital, for the people who actually helped me. And I'm not promising anything." Claire nodded, tears spilling over. "Thank you, Maria. That's all I can ask." I left the coffee shop, the pledge folded in my pocket, Evelyn's warning echoing. "Don't set yourself on fire." But this wasn't about setting myself on fire. It was about turning my pain into something bigger, something that mattered. I spent the next few days wrestling with the idea, talking it over with Teresa and Evelyn. Teresa was skeptical, but saw the good in the donation. Evelyn was blunt. "If you do this, make sure you're not lying for them. Tell the truth, whatever it costs." That's when it clicked. If I testified, it wouldn't be to save Dylan or Claire. It would be to honor the truth, mine and theirs. I called Claire and laid out my terms. I'd testify, but only if they donated $50,000 to the hospital, up front. No excuses. And I'd say exactly what I knew. No sugarcoating. To my surprise, she agreed, her voice shaking with relief. The courtroom was stark, the air heavy with anticipation. I sat in the witness stand, my hands steady, the pledge now a signed contract in the hospital's hands. Dylan sat at the defense table, his face gaunt, Claire in the gallery. Her eyes locked on me. The lawyer asked me to describe Dylan's character, and I took a deep breath, my voice clear. "I've known Dylan and Claire for years," I began. "I was there when they got engaged, when they planned their wedding. I thought they were family, but they lied, they manipulated, they hurt people, including me. They took money from a company to fund a wedding they couldn't afford, honestly. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I asked for their help, and they turned their backs, claiming they were in debt. That was a lie. They had the means but chose not to help. I won't protect that." The courtroom buzzed, the lawyer's face tightening. Claire's head dropped, her hands covering her face. I continued, my voice unwavering. "Dylan made choices that broke trust, not just with me, but with everyone. I'm here because I believe in accountability, not excuses. I hope the court sees that." I stepped down, my heart pounding but light. The donation was secured. The hospital would benefit, and I'd spoken my truth. Dylan's fate was no longer my burden. Claire caught my eye as I left, her expression unreadable. Gratitude, shame, or both, I couldn't tell. I didn't stay to find out. Back home, I watered my basil plant, the leaves thriving now. Evelyn called, her voice proud. "You did it, Maria. You turned their mess into something good without losing yourself." I smiled, the weight of the past lifting. I didn't just testify for the hospital, I testified for me. The case would go on, Dylan's future uncertain, Claire's regrets hers to carry. But I was free, not just from their demands, but from the need to be their savior. The twist wasn't just the donation or my testimony. It was me, choosing truth over loyalty, purpose over pain, and a life that was finally mine. I stepped out of the courtroom, the echo of my testimony. They lied, they manipulated, they hurt people, still ringing in my ears. The air outside was crisp, the sky a bruised grey, but I felt unburdened, like I'd shed a skin that no longer fit. Testifying hadn't been about saving Dylan or Claire. It was about speaking my truth and securing a $50,000 donation for the hospital that saved my life. I'd turned their betrayal into something meaningful, something bigger than their lies. As I walked to my car, Claire's unreadable gaze lingered in my mind. Part shame, part gratitude, wholly hers to wrestle with. I drove home, my basil plant waiting on the balcony, a quiet symbol of the life I was rebuilding. I thought I'd closed the door on their drama, but the fallout was just beginning. Evelyn met me at my apartment that evening, her eyes bright with pride. "You were a force in there, Maria," she said, hugging me tightly. "You didn't just tell the truth, you owned it. How do you feel?" "Free," I said, sinking onto the couch. "But also strange. I thought saying no to them would be the end. But testifying, tying it to the donation, it's like I rewrote the story on my terms." She nodded, handing me a mug of tea. "You did. And you didn't let them drag you down with them. That's strength, Maria. Don't forget it." I smiled, but a small part of me wondered what came next. Dylan's case wasn't over, and Claire's desperation in the courtroom hinted at a storm still brewing. I'd done my part, but families like mine, fractured, tangled, rarely let go quietly. Weeks later, the news broke. Dylan was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The judge had cited his reckless disregard for the company's finances, calling the embezzlement a betrayal of trust. I read the article on my phone, sitting at my kitchen table, the words blurring as I processed it. 3 years, not a lifetime, but enough to change him, Claire, and the family they had nearly torn apart. I waited for guilt to creep in, for the old instinct to fix things to flare up. It didn't. Instead, I felt a quiet resolve. Dylan's choices had led him here, not mine. The media frenzy followed, headlines splashing Dylan's name across local news sites. Heir to real estate fortune, jailed for embezzlement. I avoided most of it, but Evelyn kept me updated, her voice dripping with disdain. "Claire's trying to spin it," she told me one afternoon over coffee. "She's been talking to reporters, saying Dylan was under pressure and made a mistake. Even tried to paint you as the heartless aunt who wouldn't save him." I raised an eyebrow, stirring my coffee. "Heartless? After I testified and got them to donate to the hospital?" "Exactly," Evelyn said, shaking her head. "She's flailing, trying to save face, make it a sob story. But it's not working. People are seeing through it." I leaned back, unsurprised but still stung. Claire's attempt to rewrite the narrative felt like one last betrayal, a final grasp at control. But the public wasn't buying it. Online comments on the articles called her out, some even mentioning my testimony. The aunt who survived cancer and still stood up for truth. I didn't read too much, wary of getting sucked into the noise. But Evelyn's updates told me enough. Claire's spin was failing, and the family's polished image was cracking. The shift came slowly, like dawn creeping over a dark horizon. My cousin Linda, who'd guilt-tripped me at the family dinner, called me a month after the sentencing. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Her voice was hesitant, unlike the commanding tone she'd used before. "Maria, I owe you an apology. We were awful to you. I saw the news, heard about your testimony. You didn't have to do that, not after how we treated you." I gripped the phone, my throat tight. "Why now, Linda?" "Because the world knows the truth." "No," she said quickly. "Well, maybe partly. But seeing you in court, hearing what you said, you weren't weak, Maria. You were strong, dignified. I didn't see it before. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. Her words were a crack in the wall I'd built, but they didn't erase the past. I appreciate that, I said finally. But apologies don't fix everything. I needed you when I was sick, and you weren't there. I know, she said, her voice breaking. I'll live with that, but I want to do better, if you'll let me. I didn't promise anything, but I didn't hang up either. Over the next few weeks, others reached out. My brother Tom, Susan, even a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. They echoed Linda's sentiment, their voices tinged with shame and awe. You were so strong, Maria. We didn't realize. I listened, wary but open, sensing a shift. They weren't just seeing me as the aunt who fixed things. They were seeing the woman who'd survived, who'd stood tall in a courtroom and spoken truth despite their neglect. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Claire stayed silent, her media stunts fading as the news cycle moved on. I focused on my life, tending my balcony garden, volunteering at the hospital that had saved me, reconnecting with Evelyn and Teresa over long dinners. The donation had funded a new patient support program, and I visited one day, watching families in the waiting room lean on each other. It felt like a piece of my pain had been transformed, a legacy born from the ashes of betrayal. Then, 3 months after the sentencing, a letter arrived. The handwriting was Claire's, neat but shaky. I stood in my kitchen, the envelope heavy in my hands, debating whether to open it. Part of me wanted to toss it, to keep the door closed. But another part, the part that had agreed to testify, that had tied it to the hospital, needed to know what she had to say. I slit it open, my heart steady, and read, "Dear Maria, I don't expect you to read this, let alone forgive me. I've spent months trying to justify what I did, to myself, to the world. I told reporters Dylan was pressured, that we were victims of circumstance. I even tried to twist your story to fit mine. It was wrong, and I'm ashamed. You were right. I didn't deserve your help, but you gave it anyway, not for me, but for something bigger. That donation, your testimony, it showed me who you are, and who I'm not. Dylan's in prison now, and I'm alone, figuring out what's left. I don't blame you for any of it. You stood up and told the truth, and I'll carry the weight of my lies forever. Thank you for testifying, even if it wasn't what I wanted. It woke me up. I'm going to spend the next few years trying to be someone you'd be proud of. Not the girl who hurt you, but someone who learns from her mistakes. I don't expect us to be family again, but I hope you know I'm trying. With all my regret, Claire, I read it twice, my eyes stinging. The letter wasn't a magic fix, nor did it erase the years of silence, the lies about the wedding, or the pain of her abandonment. But it was honest, raw, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of the Claire I'd once known. Not the desperate woman begging at my door, but the girl who might still grow. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, not ready to respond, but not ready to throw it away either. Evelyn came over that night, and I showed her the letter. She read it, her expression softening. "She's got a long way to go," she said, handing it back. "But you're already there. You turned their mess into something beautiful, Maria. That's who you are." I smiled, glancing at my basil plant, now joined by thyme and rosemary. "I'm not done growing," I said, "but I'm not carrying their weight anymore." The family was still fractured, Dylan's sentence a shadow over them, Claire's path uncertain, but I was no longer the matriarch they'd taken for granted. I was Maria, survivor, truth-teller, a woman who'd found strength in the ruins of betrayal. The fallout had reshaped us all, but I'd built something new, a life rooted in my own worth, with room for new beginnings, whether Claire earned her way back or not. Have you ever had to walk away from someone toxic, even when it hurt? How did you find peace? Let's talk in the comments. Your story might help someone else. Claire's letter sat in my drawer, a quiet weight I neither embraced nor discarded. Her words, "I'll spend the next few years trying to be someone you'd be proud of," lingered. A fragile thread to a past I'd once cherished but no longer needed. Dylan's 3-year sentence had closed one chapter, and the family's newfound respect, sparked by my courtroom truth, felt like a belated acknowledgement of the strength I'd always had. I'd turned their betrayal into a $50,000 donation for the hospital that saved me, and in doing so, I'd rewritten my role. Not as their matriarch, but as Maria, a survivor who chose her own path. The fallout had reshaped us all, but I was ready to step forward, to build something new from the ashes. Evelyn noticed the change first. Over dinner one evening, she set down her fork and grinned. "You're different, Maria. Lighter? Like you finally let go of their baggage." I laughed, sipping my wine. "I think I have. The letter, the sentencing, the family's apologies. It's not about them anymore. It's about what I do next." She raised her glass. "To next. Whatever that looks like." I clinked my glass against hers, my mind already turning. The hospital donation had been a start, a way to give back to the place that carried me through cancer. But I wanted more. Not just to repay kindness, but to create it. I'd survived not because of my family, but because of strangers, neighbors, and friends like Evelyn. That community, that unexpected lifeline, was something I could build for others. The idea came to me one morning while tending my balcony garden, now thriving with basil, thyme, and rosemary. I'd been volunteering at the hospital, chatting with patients in the waiting room, and noticed a pattern. Women over 50, like me, often face their diagnoses alone. Their families too busy or too distant to help. I remembered the isolation of my chemo chair, the ache of silence from Claire and Dylan. What if I could give those women a space to connect, to lean on each other? A support group, small, local, focused on the unique challenges of battling cancer later in life. I called the hospital's outreach coordinator, Diane, that afternoon. She'd been thrilled about the donation and welcomed my visits. "A support group?" she said, her voice bright. "Maria, that's brilliant. We have programs, but something tailored for older women, led by someone who's been through it. That could be a game changer." "It's personal," I said. "I know what it's like to feel invisible. I want these women to know they're not." Diane agreed to help me set it up, offering a meeting room and resources. I spent the next few weeks planning, nervous but energized. I designed flyers, reached out to local churches and community centers, and leaned on Evelyn and Teresa for advice. "You're building a family," Teresa said, helping me staple flyers. "The kind you choose, not the one you're stuck with." The first meeting was small. 6 women, including me, gathered in a cozy hospital room with coffee and pastries. Their stories echoed mine. Diagnoses that upended their lives, families who meant well but drifted, and the quiet strength it took to keep going. Joan, a 62-year-old widow, shared how her kids lived states away, leaving her to face breast cancer alone. "I didn't know I needed this," she said, her voice thick. "But sitting here with you all, it's like I can breathe again." I nodded, my own eyes stinging. "That's why we're here, to breathe together." The group grew steadily, from 6 to 12, then 20. We met weekly, sharing fears, triumphs, and practical tips. How to navigate insurance, manage side effects, or ask for help without shame. I wasn't just leading, I was learning, finding strength in their resilience. One woman, Rita, brought a quilt she'd made during chemo, each square a story of survival. "This is us," she said, draping it over a chair. Patchwork, but strong. The group became my anchor, a reminder that healing wasn't just about surviving cancer but rebuilding a life worth living. I poured myself into it. And word spread. A local journalist, Maya, attended a meeting for a story on community health initiatives. Afterward, she pulled me aside, her notebook open. "Maria, your story. The cancer, the family drama, the donation, this group. It's inspiring. Would you share it for a health magazine? Readers need to hear this." I hesitated, wary of the spotlight. My testimony had already drawn attention, and I'd seen how Claire's media spin had twisted things. But Maya's eyes were kind, her focus on the group, not the scandal. "Okay," I said. "But it's not just about me. It's about these women, what we're building." The article came out a month later, titled "From Betrayal to Breakthrough: One Woman's Fight for Herself and Others." It detailed my cancer journey, the family's abandonment, the embezzlement, and my testimony. But it centered on the support group, calling it a beacon of hope. I read it at my kitchen table, my hands shaking. The words were raw but honest, painting me not as a victim, but as a woman who'd turned pain into purpose. Joan and Rita were quoted, their voices amplifying the message. The hospital reported a surge in donations, and new women joined the group, drawn by the story. Evelyn framed the article and hung it in my apartment, grinning. "You're a rock star, Maria. Look at what you've done." I laughed, but my heart swelled. The group, the article, it was proof I'd done more than survive. I'd created something lasting, something that didn't depend on the family who'd failed me. One evening, as I prepared for a group meeting, I pulled Claire's letter from the drawer. I hadn't responded, unsure if I ever would. Her promise to become someone I'd be proud of felt distant, but the article made me wonder. Had she seen it? Did she know what I'd built? I didn't need her approval, but a small part of me hoped she'd read it and felt the weight of what she'd lost. Not just me, but the chance to be part of something real. The group meeting that night was packed, the room buzzing with warmth. We shared stories, laughed, cried, and planned a fundraiser for the hospital. As we wrapped up, Joan raised her coffee mug. "To Maria," she said, "for giving us this family." I blushed, shaking my head. "To all of us. We're the ones who keep showing up." Later, alone on my balcony, I looked at my garden, now a small jungle of herbs and flowers, and thought about the journey that had brought me here. I'd thought my story was one of abandonment, of Claire and Dylan's lies, of a family that forgot me. But really, it was one of survival, of choosing myself when no one else did, of building a community from the ruins of betrayal. The magazine article, the support group, the hospital donation, they were chapters in a story I was still writing. One where I wasn't defined by who left me, but by what I created. Claire's letter stayed in the drawer, a question mark I might answer one day. Dylan's sentence ticked on. The family's apologies, a work in progress. But I didn't need their validation anymore. I had Joan, Rita, Evelyn, Teresa, and a room full of women who reminded me every week that strength wasn't just surviving. It was choosing to grow, to connect, to live. I closed my eyes, the night air cool against my skin, and whispered to myself, "This is enough." And for the first time, I believed it. Do you believe people can truly change? Or are some actions just too much to forgive? Let's talk in the comments. And if my story moved you, please subscribe. You might just hear your story reflected here someday too.